Hello and welcome to Micro Minute. My name's Marty Jopson, and today what I've got for you is vile and disgusting and is growing in this little Tupperware here. Inside here there's a piece of bread and it's covered in bread mould. Oh yes. So what I did was I took a little corner of, it's actually a pita bread, and let me show you this up close, so to speak. So what we have here, if I sort of hold that there, you can see here's my little Tupperware, and this is the sort of sign that apparently is seen completely normal in my house. That tells you a lot about my house. But anyway, let me show you what I've got in here. Whoa, look at that. It is indeed an extremely mouldy piece of bread. So this piece of bread, what I did was I snipped it off the corner of a pita bread. And then, we don't need to make lots of bread mould. And then what I did is, to make sure it actually got mouldy, I dropped it in the fruit bowl just over there, because fruit moulds that you get on fruits, the surface of fruit, are often the same sort of moulds that grow on breads, and you always get those moulds. They're always living on the surface of the fruit, waiting to sort of, to get inside the fruit and make it go mouldy. So anyway, so I did that, and then I left it for a couple of weeks, and as you can see, we've actually grown an assortment of different moulds. There's a couple of different colours there. But it's quite difficult to tell moulds apart because there are all sorts of different moulds you get on bread. So I'm going to put it underneath my microscope. Here's my microscope, my faithful microscope. That's going to go under there. I'm then going to turn off the desk camera and show you what this stuff looks like. This is sort of a bizarre lunar landscape. And I should point out that we are now on version, I've lost track, 7.0, 8.0. I don't know what track version we've got of the technological setup, but hopefully this tech works today, because we had a bit of a disaster for the last one. There are no air gaps for the techies amongst you. Everything is hardwired now. Everything. Obviously, except for the wire that goes all the way to your house. But anyway, so this is what bread mould looks like underneath the microscope. There's a sort of a grey, dusty look to it, and then there's a few other patches. There's a patch here. Can you see that? That patch there is kind of interesting. And there's a few brown patches. But obviously what we want to do is we want to zoom in. Now, there are different types of bread mould. One of the common types is one called Rhizopus, or black bread mould. And I can immediately tell you that this is not that, because that one has white... They're called hyphae. So basically what these are fungi. These are types of mushroom. Mushroom is a fungus. And it forms these thin, single cell thick strands, which then run through the thing it's growing in. And then when it's got enough energy, when it's sort of grown big enough, it pops up and creates fruiting bodies that will create spores that will then go on and make new organisms elsewhere. Now, Rhizopus is common on bread, and you get long, thin bits sticking up. I mean, when I say long and thin, maybe a couple of millimetres, and then at the top there's a tiny little black blob, which is the spore, and you can see those with the naked eye. This is not Rhizopus. Okay, what else is it? Well, if you look closely, you can start to see what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and if I just zoom in on the surface like this, and I've gone right in now, I'm at maximum zoom. I'll turn the light up a bit. Maximum zoom. And it just sort of looks like a shag pile carpet, really, doesn't it? It's a bit weird. That's it. That's what the surface looks like. But immediately just looking at that, I can tell you that it's not one of the other common types of mould. It's not Aspergillus, which is a mould they use for making things like miso and fermenting bean curd and stuff like that. So it's a very common mould used in stuff. So this is, I'm zoomed in as far as I can go now. I'm 50 times magnification. It's not Aspergillus because, again, that has single long strands, and at the top there's little balls. It's like tiny little lollipops. Okay, they're not black. They're not as big as the Rhizopus black fungus, black bread mould, but I can see that I don't have lots of little lollipops. So what have I got? Well, I've also probably not got mucor, which is another really common one, which I'd really like to see, because that one is the first microorganism that was ever described. It was described in 1665 by a guy called Robert Hooke. It's not mucor. Again, you can tell because that tends to have little blobs. No, this one's quite distinct. This is Penicillium. This is Penicillium mould, and that's not really surprising because you tend to get that a lot on fruit. Now, it comes in all sorts of different varieties, and I reckon all of what I've got here is Penicillium. Okay, so even though I've got different coloured patches, all of it is Penicillium. And if I go right to the edge, at the edge of the bread, you can sort of see it down the edge, and that allows me to show you in a bit more detail. So let's see if we can find a good bit. There's a really amazing bit here. This one might not be Penicillium. This one might be something else. Can you see all those tiny, tiny, tiny little strands? So each one of these, if I show you here, you can see all these tiny, tiny, tiny little strands. These are individual hyphae that together make up what's known as a mycelium. I reckon that one, I'm looking at that one might be something a bit different. But anyway, let's see if we can find a good section now. It's about getting the right illumination as well. Right, let's go zooming in right here. Right, let's see. That's quite a good bit there. Right, now I'm just going to adjust the illumination. There. By shining the light at it at just the right angle, you can see more, because half the job when you're doing microscopy is to get the illumination just right. Ooh. And again, these are very small. They're right on the edge of what is sensible to look at with this microscope. So what you're looking at here is now the edge of the sort of the vertical surface of the bread that's disappearing off into the distance there. And you can see all these little sort of bits sticking up. And the reason why I know this must be Penicillium is because what Penicillium, it's Penicillium mould that makes penicillin, the drug. That's where it gets its name from. But what happens is those thin hyphae grow up, and then what happens is rather than forming a blob, a little lollipop ball, which is then packed full of spores that then go off and create new moulds, what happens is it forms sort of like fingers. So if that's the bit growing up there, and you can see that here, there's sort of a bit growing up here, and there are the fingers at the top, and then again there's one here that curves over, and the fingers are sort of sticking out that way now. That way, got the other way around. Okay, and in fact all of these, all the way along the surface here, that's essentially what you're seeing. These sort of tufty bits sticking up are the fingers that stick up. And basically what the fingers are made of is they grow and then they snip off individual little cells. So they're just little round individual cells that are individual spores. You've got blop, 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 lots and lots and lots of little individual ones making up the finger. Now we can't actually see those individual cells with this system because I don't have enough magnification. I'd have to put it under a different microscope, but then you couldn't put the whole piece of bread under the microscope. So you always have to, it's always a payoff. Now, obviously, this mould, this particular mould, is very common on things like bread. We go back to 1928 with Alexander Fleming. He's the first guy that discovers that some types of penicillin... Ooh, I've wafted my penicillin. Did you see that? They're kind of all wafted about as I wave my arms. That penicillin mould turned out to be antibacterial. It kills bacteria. It wasn't until people like Flory and Chain in the 1940s and Dorothy Hodgkin, who works out the structure, they actually work out what's going on and create an actual drug. But there we can see, let's have a look. Let's see if I can find another good section. So, next time, this is quite good here. You can sort of see the individual strands. And again, it's about getting the lighting just right. Again, I've then got to centre it. It's always tricky. Come back. So can you see here, again, we're on the sort of the cliff edge of the bread. And look at that one there. You can really clearly see the fingers coming out. And each one of those fingers is made up of lots and lots and lots and lots of individual spores. And they are what create the sort of the dustiness. And in fact, that is what a lot of people are allergic to. A lot of people are allergic to fungal spores. And I'm going to stop on that point. So that's all I wanted to show you today. I'm quite pleased that we actually managed to get some bread mould. I might try growing some different bread moulds. I'd quite like to have a look at Mucor or the black bread mould, just because they're a bit different. It would be quite nice to see those, bit of alternative. As always, thanks go to the folk at Zeiss for providing the cameras, and tech version number 7 appears to have sorted itself out. So on Wednesday, we will be looking at, Wednesday is zoology, and I'm going to be pulling a little woodlouse out of the garden and showing you that. So until Wednesday, take care. Thank you.